Porter said back, I don't need a lecture about being a mother. And Bianco said, you might.
Last episode of like, does Gen Z even want to be homeowners? But for people who do, and they want it to be a choice,
The misuse of the funds when they're appropriated for specific, very niche issues. Another issue being, they talked about the high-speed rail. What do you think about that?
it's not about not wanting to live there. It's just that you don't have the capabilities to. Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Washed Up. I'm Abby and this is Colin, and this is episode 50. We are commenting on the weekly news so that you don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do.
Today is May 11th, and we are going to be talking about the debate for governor in California that just happened. I think it was last week, and it was very, very interesting. Their election is coming up in about a month for the primaries, and then whoever are the top two candidates for who get elected in that election are going to go on to the November election. And Abby and I both went to school in California and San Diego, and so we have some vested interest in California. Something that I feel like this story is something we have some skin in the game. We still have a lot of friends who live in California who we care about very deeply and want to see them doing well. And arguably, under Gavin Newsom, they have been struggling a little bit. So yeah, that's what kind of why we're interested in this story. I think anyone from California who's planning on voting could watch this if they don't want to watch the debate because it was kind of a snooze, especially the first half. But we'll break it down for you, talk about our thoughts on it, and maybe you'll have a better sense after that.
Yeah, I was actually born in California too. For the first 2.5 years of my life, I lived in the Bay Area. So maybe that could also be a little bit relevant to me as well. I have some family there. I love California. I'm always going back.
Let's go into the candidates real quick. First of all, there's Xavier Becerra, who's the former HHS secretary under Joe Biden. You have Chad Bianco, who's the Riverside sheriff. You have Katie Porter, who's the Ocean City representative who was in Congress for a time. Tom Steyer, who is a billionaire. Antonio Villaraigosa, who's a former mayor of LA. And those are all the Democrats. Who were the Republicans on the stage, Abby?
We have Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco. I think that Steve Hilton, he's a UK, British American political commentator, and then Bianco is the sheriff of Riverside. Riverside. Yeah.
Yeah, and like to distinguish the two of them just a little bit, everyone was saying that Steve Hilton is basically just a Fox talking head, which, I don't know. I think he had something a little bit more to offer than just that, but I do understand anytime you see someone coming from the media lane into politics, it is a little bit questionable to me. And he seemed very Trumpy to me. Like he would basically support anything Trump would. He's actually been endorsed by Donald Trump also. Versus Bianco, the sheriff, just seemed like a little bit more kind of like even keeled to me, a little bit more level. Like he seemed like he'd seen some
More
stuff
like
in his
Law and
time.
Order. Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
your kind of traditional conservative Republican who is most focused on like safety and bringing down crime.
Yeah.
What about distinguishing the Democrats from one another just a bit? Um, I would say Villagrosa seemed a little bit more moderate to me, the former LA mayor. He also seemed like Bianco, like he'd seen some stuff. And to me, I think like being the mayor of LA would almost be harder than being the governor of California. I don't know how to explain it, but that is just such an overrun city with problems, that I actually respect the fact that he's been in charge there.
Yeah, Becerra, he is like he gives more like traditional Democrat Californian governor vibes. He worked under Joe Biden as the US Secretary of Health and Human Services. Some people like make a comparison between like him and Newsom if he were to be elected.
Yeah, he definitely came across as more DC to me in the way that he was, polished and like well spoken like a politician, versus like Katie Porter, who branded herself as like just your average California mom who is just trying to make it through the day and make sure her kids are all right and everyone's like at school on time. Like that was kind of the vibe she was giving, even though I very much question that given the given the media and the clips that have emerged about Porter, I think she can handle her own perfectly fine. I don't know that she's like this sweet innocent mom. Funny story about that real quick. She actually was got into a tussle with a journalist when they were doing a face-to-face interview, and the journalist was asking Porter about how does she expect to pick up all the Trump supporters if she's so vehemently against Trump, and Porter was saying like I don't need them anyway, and this and that, and it got to the point where Porter threatened to walk out of the interview, and she's like, you know what, I'm done.
Also asked the other candidates, do you think you need any of those 40% of California voters to win? And you're saying, no, you don't.
No, I'm saying I'm going to try to win every vote I can. And what I'm saying to you is that.
Well, to those voters, okay, so you.
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
I'm calling it. This is done. And the reporter tried to bring Porter back and say like, well, we've asked all the candidates these questions. I don't understand. And Katie was having none of it. And that clip went very, very viral. And
every other candidate has answered.
I don't care.
Follow-ups.
I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation in which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
Ms.
And
Porter,
we're just going to circle around.
I am an investigative
I have never had to do
reporter.
this before, ever.
You've never had to have a conversation with
to end
a
an
reporter?
interview.
Okay, but every other candidate has done this.
What part of I'm me? I'm running for governor because I'm a leader. So I am going to make.
So you're not going to answer questions from reporters? Okay, why don't we go through? I will continue to ask follow-up questions because that's my job.
well, Porter's been leaning into it. She actually made an ad, kind of alluding to her past clips that have emerged of her being kind of aggressive or abrasive with journalists. She's been owning it in the same kind of like ham-fisted way that I think a lot of kind of like older mom types would.
Yeah, and we always say on this channel that all press is good press, right? Uh,
Well, another clip of her really didn't look great, where she was doing a Zoom interview, and she had a staffer in the background who got into the line of sight, and she yelled at the staffer, "Get out of my effing shot!"
Early to air pollution and other problems, and the state could lose. Get out of my fucking shot.
I wanted to tell you that that's actually incorrect. It's not that it's electric vehicles. It's that if we don't meet the commitments under the Paris Climate Accord.
Okay, it does. Okay, you also were in my shot before that.
And that clip also went mega viral because she was just acting in a very kind of, again, aggressive, assertive way, which is what you need if you want to be a politician or a congressperson. But even so, she's had to kind of apologize for that and say, I had to apologize to the staffer. That behavior was uncalled for, it was out of line, inappropriate for like a working relationship. So it's just funny. Porter has a lot of personality, that is for sure.
That's one way to put it. I think we went through the majority with him. I guess we could talk about Steyer. He's our billionaire here. He advocates a lot for like environmental activism is what I've seen, at least like what he puts out there. And he yeah, billionaire, used to work at Goldman Sachs.
I wonder if he knows Catherine Rumler.
Probably.
Anywho, so yeah, those are your candidates, California. Good luck.
For the people who haven't watched the debate, they talked about all the candidates talked about a lot of different topics, such as like housing and the cost of living, immigration, homelessness, healthcare, taxes, climate change, all sorts of fun topics that people should care about there or that affect Californians. And another reason I think that the California election for governor is super important as well, even if you don't live there, is like how many Americans live in California and how big of an impact the California like vote matters. I think it's like one of the bigger economies out of all the
Yeah.
states in the US, like fifth or something like that is what I
Yeah,
read.
I think it's the fourth biggest economy in the world, actually, which is insane. But at the same time, California has its own like host of issues that I feel like most other states don't have, and it's very expensive because of that. And so, yeah, the very niche things that make California successful also can be problems for the state also. So, like you said, the candidates at this debate kind of got into the nitty-gritty of those specific issues that are kind of unique to California, and maybe we can speak from our personal experience too about how we saw those issues playing out while we were there.
I mean, I think the number one issue that at least we experienced, or I won't speak for you, but like I experienced in California would definitely be like affordability and the cost of living as like a young person there.
Hmm.
I did on-campus housing the first like 2 years, and then the second 2 years I lived off campus, but it was at like one of those kind of like a satellite USD place that everyone lives, and it wasn't through the school, so it was through housing. And I remember my senior year, we were trying to look for places to live in San Diego that were more affordable for the amount of, and I also had like five other roommates, to be fair. And we wanted to see where else we can live and see what we could afford. Barely anything. But to be fair, we were also college students at the time. I do think that this is an issue that impacts a lot of young people in many major cities, but maybe especially in California. I think San Francisco is the most expensive place to live in the country, if I'm wrong. I think it is.
I think they said in the debate San Jose was one of the pricier in the housing market, but certainly San Francisco too, to the point where a lot of people want to go there, like you said, to start their careers in tech or whatever. And yeah, I know a couple of people who live there now. I'm not sure how they're affording it, but good for them, I guess.
I love the Bay Area. I love San Francisco. Definitely the cost of living versus like how much people make and like how the prices are just keep moving up. And we kind of touched this in our last episode of like does Gen Z even want to be homeowners? But for people who do and they want it to be a choice, maybe the area is not the right place to go if you're considering doing that. Um, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, so I'm from the East Coast, from like I grew up in there, went to high school on the East Coast, and when I moved out to California for college, I had done that kind of thinking like I was never going to come back to the East Coast. Maybe it was a little bit of a case of like the grass is always greener on the other side syndrome, but I moved out to California thinking like this is it. I'm choosing the place that I want to live like for the rest of my life, period, amen. And then once I got there, I realized like, oh man, like there's a lot of issues here, including the affordability issue. And so by the time I left California and moved back here to the East Coast, I think the average like down payment in San Diego was over $1 million at that point, and the prices of housing had just gone so through the roof. It was basically untenable to actually live there as a young professional, and I just found that the job market there was not competitive enough to support being a young professional out there, which is kind of why I came back to the East Coast and have been able to live kind of like more of the lifestyle that I want out here in DC, as opposed to I think if I was in California, I would be like scrimping to get by.
I have some family, and there's definitely been a lot of change. My grandparents have lived in the same house since like the 80s, I want to say, and all their neighbors have been like kind of bought out and stuff like that, but they like are so hard on like no, we're not gonna sell our house. We're not gonna give this up. So I very much appreciate that aspect.
I mean, the people who moved there in the 70s and 80s are some of the luckiest people in the world because they got property there when it was still relatively affordable, if not as affordable as anywhere else in the US, despite how like, beautiful it is in California and what a almost like paradise-like place it is. So they got land there when it was still relatively affordable. And then I know some people who, lived there for the past 40, 50 years and sold their house and basically are set for life. I mean, like if you had property and are able to sell it now in California, I don't know how much profit you're gonna make, but you're gonna be set for life. Actually know someone who did that and then they moved to Tennessee and they're basically like living large there.
What did
Because just
you
the cost that what they had sunk into the house was relatively little for what they're able to get out of it.
What did you think about the different responses from candidates about like affordability and housing? Did you find any that you specifically agreed with?
So a lot of them were kind of in agreement about why the issue. I mean, there's kind of an issue on the supply side of housing where there's just not enough of it, and it's not always easy to, like fix the high demand, you can't just make housing like overnight, and especially you can't make it overnight when there's a ton of regulations and permitting laws and all of this. And California is kind of known to have a lot of regulation and bureaucracy, and that definitely raises the cost for people to actually build housing. So then there's a shortage, and then that drives prices up. And that's exactly what I think all the candidates had put their finger on the pulse of like this, the problem is mostly regulation. But a lot of them had different solutions for it. Like some of them think that you should subsidize the down payments on a house, when my personal belief is if you do that in a free market system, then that's going to cause people to raise the prices of housing to adjust and accommodate for the subsidies that you're giving out. So I don't know. What do you think about that and how the candidates kind of responded to the issue?
Yeah, a lot of them were touching on this concept of like the California dream and like people wanting to move to California originally because it's so easy to, build there and have single family homes. I actually, interestingly enough, this is a little bit off topic, but interestingly enough, I think a lot of people are moving from California to Vegas, my hometown, because it's so much easier to build single family homes here, as well as like it's close enough, I guess, to California. And the amount of like young people that are moving here to save money on like state taxes as well as being able to actually own a home is very interesting. And I'm super interested to see how this affects like the later years in Nevada and if rules are going to change in that way. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of them were kind of like you said, saying the same reasons as to like why housing is so expensive. Um, I don't know. I think I didn't really strongly connect with anyone's solution to how to solve the housing affordability issue. I remember, I think it was Steyer, he said something about um like in my notes I say closing corporate tax loopholes to fund local housing growth and talking about new housing and supporting affordable housing. I kind of liked that, but I think he didn't give enough detail on that.
No, totally. I liked when Bianco said we want to live here, we just can't, and that's in reference to that idea of again the California dream and how there's sort of this mythos around California of like you can go out there and make whatever life you want, and that's still very that that almost mythological aura around California is still very real. But again, the practical side of it is makes that a little bit more difficult. So. I actually liked when Bianco said that. That personally kind of was my experience when I went out there, and I have a very high threshold for can't, but I definitely found it to be kind of unrealistic to live there long term. And I feel like I got out at kind of a good time, personally. Um, but you raised another issue too about there's a lot of people leaving California who are, like you said, are going to Vegas or like Austin or
Utah
Texas or
is another.
Florida or where else?
Utah, I've been hearing Salt Lake is like really popping now.
Yeah, but people are leaving because there's such a high tax burden in California and such affordability issues. And yeah, I think that that's going to cause California to lose a lot of revenue, and then potentially they're not going to be able to keep up with the price of all of the programs that they have, and it's not going to make it any easier for them to do the things that they need to do, like build more housing. That's for sure.
Yeah, especially in really crowded cities, I can't see how there's even space to build more housing. I think that's like a whole other issue when it comes to people wanting to live somewhere. Like I totally agree with that statement about like it's not about not wanting to live there. It's just that you don't have the capabilities to. Um, yeah, because like I said, I love California, and I think many people would love it if it was more accessible to more people.
Yeah, and so one of the solutions that has been proposed to kind of fix the loss of revenue that's coming from people leaving the state is they propose a tax on billionaires, where it would basically be like I think 5% of their total net worth or something that would get taxed and would go to pay for certain things that the state needs. And so that's actually on the ballot in November, as Californians are going to be voting on whether or not they want to implement this tax, and this tax would retroactively apply to any billionaire who was living in the state at the beginning of this year. So some billionaires have already kind of like tried to flee and like get away from this, but even they would be kind of factored into having to pay this tax. Interestingly enough, during the debate, they went candidate by candidate and asked them, "What do you think about this wealth tax?" And all of them said they were opposed to it. Interestingly, Steyer said he would sign it if it passed.
Yeah, and
Uh,
he's a billionaire, no?
yeah, Steyer is a billionaire. That's funny. When they were giving the candidates qualifications, that was like how they described him. They're like, Tom Steyer, billionaire.
That's it.
I actually don't know how he made his money, which is probably the real question. But yeah, so the billionaire tax, they all said they were opposed to it, including the Democrats, Katie Porter and Matt Mahan, who both said that they would oppose that, but they would support other ways of taxing the wealthier.
That is really interesting to me that the two of them disagreed on that because I thought that that was totally something that they would say that they were in favor of. I wonder, do you remember if they said anything about like what they would be in favor of, or they just like kind of let that fall off?
You mean as far as like gathering more revenue?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Not really. I am not sure how they plan to tax. I'm sure some kind of like heavier tax burden on the wealthier. That's sort of a Democrat staple in terms of their policy. Um, But yeah, Katie Porter, the way that she was positioning herself on that stage was basically just like the anti-billionaire. Like was attacking, she was sniping at Steyer a lot because of him being a billionaire and saying like, well, you're the wealthiest person on this stage and this and that. I find that to be unhelpful. Like you can't just attack or criticize someone because they're wealthy. If you want to attack how they made their money or you have some qualms about how they're not very charitable with that money, then fine. But I thought it was kind of petty of her to be just saying like, well, he's a billionaire and I'm like one of you and I'm just a mom of three who drives a minivan and da 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 da. I found it to be like very fake. And I also think the billionaire was a fake in his own way, but at least he wasn't like, I don't think it's helpful to denigrate people just because they happen to have money.
Yeah, at least he was talking about I don't know, corporate loopholes and whatnot, and maybe that might also be like a pose on him on his campaign when he also is like we said, a billionaire. Something that Colin and I always talk about this show is to bring back true philanthropy. Or like, if you want to be the hero, if you want to be the Tony Stark of the world, then you should um donate your money, and so many more people will like you because of that.
Pretty much. I mean, it's really easy. There's a lot of issues in the world and a lot of people in need. So yeah, you don't have to necessarily like publicize how much money you're giving away, but I do think, if you're motivated by having your name on a building or something like that, then that's better reason than to just sit on your pile of money and accrue for yourself, basically.
Yeah, I like the idea of creating programs where there's like investments in public services for everyone. I don't really, I haven't really done enough research to see like how like what we were talking about in terms of where we're gonna get revenue from or how that would be the most sustainable in California without like people, I guess, moving away to avoid being taxed extra or um killing the middle class, which is another thing like I don't want to happen.
So your question about how would they raise the revenue, particularly Matt Mahan, who was San Jose mayor, and Katie Porter, who is a former OC rep, Orange County rep. That's especially relevant in Porter's case because she also wants to pay so that everyone can have a free UC or CSU degree, which is a lot of money. I mean, I think she is proposing some program where you can go to like 2 years of community college and then transfer to a UC and have your tuition paid for higher education. And that's a lovely idea, but again, it's how do you actually raise that money when we're already looking at the state losing a bunch of revenue from the people that it's already lost, and all of the myriad other issues it has that it just pours money into To me, the issue with California has never really been the lack of revenue. It has been the driving people away with the crappy social policy and and also the misuse of the funds when they're appropriated for specific, very niche issues. Another issue being they talked about the high-speed rail. What do you think about that?
I mean, they've been talking about the high-speed rail forever. Like,
It's a joke at this point.
yeah, I remember there was like so many different versions. I swear I can't even remember like which one was the high speed rail was like actually something real or if it was just like a meme. Like I remember I swear I was in high school when it was like we're gonna make one from Vegas to LA and it's gonna take 3 hours or something like that, or 2 hours and Vegas to the Bay Area. And like I said, I have family in the Bay Area, and at the time my I think my dad was working half in LA, or maybe my grandpa was, I don't really remember. So we would always be going to like LA and to the Bay Area like all the time. I still go to the Bay Area a lot. And that was something I was really excited about when I was 12.
Yeah, so just to set it up for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with California a little bit, most of the cities in California are along the West Coast, the Pacific Ocean, and they're pretty spread out. And like to drive from San Diego all the way up to San Fran is probably like 7 hours, and then NorCal is even farther, probably like a whole 12 hours or more. So it's very spread out in California. And there's not very good access or transportation. They do have an Amtrak that runs north from like San Diego to LA, but it's notoriously unreliable. I mean, I've even gotten screwed over by trying to take that train, and like there's always like landslides that cover the tracks, and it's just a whole freaking mess. And so transportation around the state is very hard unless you have a car. And even with a car, it's inconvenient and takes a long time. So this idea of putting a high-speed rail to run up the West Coast or like to other states is like a dream to most people. Like it would be so nice if you could just hop on a train and go to San Fran from San Diego. But again, the costs associated with building this are enormous, and the regulations and the bureaucracy and all of this that has accrued to the point where like just to get this approved from an environmental standpoint has taken like I want to say over a decade, like you said. And it's become a joke at this point that this thing is never going to get built. There's actually a Simpsons episode that it reminds me of where this guy comes into town and he's like gonna build a monorail around the whole city and like bring everyone together around it, and they're all jazzed about it and they like sing songs about the monorail. And then he basically cons them and takes all their money. And that's exactly what I think the high-speed rail project has been for California.
Yeah, and like I said, it's definitely a like you said, I mean, it's definitely a dream. Like I would love for that to happen. I do think that there's other issues in California though that need to be tackled before throwing millions of dollars, billions of dollars at
Probably
that.
billions.
Billions. Um I don't know. I did think that like the issues that they did talk about, like we said at the top of the episode, are like the most important things. The homelessness issues
Oh
and
yeah.
little bit like that is definitely like one of the number one issues. I guess it's kind of connected to housing affordability too, but people people without homes in California, many. Like I think that that is the most important issue in California.
Oh yeah, I would say the homelessness crisis in California is probably the first thing you notice about the state if you're not from there and you go there. And there's a ton of people on the street. They also are just kind of like don't want to generalize, but they're kind of just different from like homelessness on the East Coast, where the people who have been living on the street oftentimes for decades at that point, um, they behave very differently than the East Coast. On the East Coast, they kind of like stick to themselves and they like won't bother you if you don't like make direct eye contact and you just walk down the street, and there's sort of this like mutual understanding of like you do you, I'll do me, don't bother me kind of thing. I would say I know many people, especially where we lived in San Diego, in by the university, people would get harassed and like accosted all the time by homeless people. And it's very sad because, again, most of the people who are living on the streets ran into dire circumstances. And, actually, Katie Porter mentioned that a lot of times it only takes $6,000 to prevent someone from becoming homeless, which is, I don't know where she got that statistic from, but point being, all of us are vulnerable to being in that situation of no longer having housing. At any point, something could go wrong, your apartment floods, fire, whatever, suddenly you're homeless, and that's terrible. But just the way that the state of California deals with it, um, I don't know. I think it's very counterproductive. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to emphasize like losing your home or being a person who's homeless, like I think that that could definitely happen to anyone. I don't like the idea. I mean, we talk a lot about like the dehumanization of people when it comes to some issues.
Hmm.
I feel like I need to say like I don't like the idea of people dehumanizing others just because
Yeah.
they are found in this scenario. Um, I do agree that there is a huge issue with what's happening there. I think there could be there needs to be it needs to be solved a lot of the time at like the root cause. I think some I forgot who was mentioning, probably Porter, focusing on like the mental health care aspect and affordability. Um,
No, sorry, actually it was Becerra and Villagrosa who were talking about the mental health thing. Porter said that she thought it wasn't about mental health, that it was about the cost of housing.
oh, my bad, guys.
No, I just
But yeah,
you're
I agree
good.
with that. Like, I think that that is something that we I mean, California as a state, as a country, honestly, the US should focus on more. Yeah.
I don't know, I only say that because it is very much a chicken or an egg problem of which came first. So a lot of people who find themselves homeless are addicted to substances, but did they lose their housing, become homeless, and use substances or have mental health problems as a result of that? Or the other way around, where they had mental health problems and substance abuse, and then they couldn't pay for housing slash lost their housing. And people on the stage were arguing about that. And the reason I point out it was Porter who said it was about the cost of housing is because I think both of them are right at the same time, but are taking a different side on it based off of whatever is going to sell better for their, agenda or platform. But Bianco, I really liked how he called it the homeless industrial complex, where basically like there's so many programs in the state of California to subsidize people who find themselves um, unhoused, to use a word that is very controversial. And in those cases, there's a lot of nonprofits and stuff that pour a lot of resources and money and also make a lot of money off of the issue of homelessness. And he was pointing out that we have to be mindful that when we're pouring billions of dollars into fixing the homelessness situation and nothing is getting better, then we should really look at the people who are administering those programs very skeptically because there's no excuse for the problem continuing to get worse and worse.
Yeah, I guess I would be more in favor of like rehabilitation in that sense. I don't I think it was probably Bianco and Hilton who were more of like an anti-encampment enforcement
Yep.
policies. I don't think that is something I'm in favor of. I don't like the idea of like aggressive like removals of what these people probably what the only things they own. Like I think that's inhumane. So yeah, going back to like that root cause of like supporting maybe like forced treatment or something and rehabilitation at that root cause.
Totally. And like you said, Hilton was taking the position that homeless, like to be encamped on the street is illegal. So if someone is in an encampment, they should be able to be cleared. I remember when we were living in California and San Diego, they did pass a citywide law like that. I did not really see any reduction in encampments though, but I remember that right before our senior year of college, they passed that. And then it was supposed to be implemented throughout our entire like fall semester. I didn't see any changes personally. So that's another thing is enforcement of those kinds of laws. It may very well be illegal to be encamped, but like you said, like to forcibly go around rounding up those people, where do you bring them? What do you do with them? Do you send them to jail for how long? And then once they go to jail, when do they get out? What happens after they get out? These are all like very real practical questions that I think some people get very I don't know, idealistic about that there's some easy solution to. Like if we could just give them all a room with a key and have like secure housing program or emergency housing or rental assistance, then it would fix the underlying issue. But I don't know. I really think this is such an entrenched problem in that state.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's, like I said, like one of the most important issues in California, if not the most.
I think I have to say, moving there, I did realize that there's a subset of people who don't want to have homes because, to pay your rent, you have to have a job. Some people don't want to have jobs, so they would honestly rather forego being a member of a productive society, and they would almost rather live on the street. And in California, obviously, the reason why there is such a number of homeless people is that the weather affords them that ability to just say, yeah, I don't want a house, I don't want to rent, I don't want a job. I'm just going to live outside. And that works in that case. But it's also, like you said, a very undignified way to live. It leads to other downstream problems. The rest of society has to kind of pick up for those individuals who aren't supporting themselves and all of the myriad problems that they encounter living without a house.
Right, right. Um, what other issues stuck out to you in the debate?
Well, they talked a lot about immigration, which is a huge thing with California also being a border state. And, we living in San Diego, we are right across the border from Tijuana. Did you ever go down to Tijuana from San
Yeah,
Diego?
I used to work with border education in Tijuana. Um,
Hmm.
one of my most favorite jobs I had. I loved living in San Diego because of that reason. It gave me opportunities like that. Um, Going off of that, I don't agree with the more conservative takes for immigration, like Hilton's and Bianco's, what they were talking about. I think Bianco was on the harsher side of that, supporting stronger ICE policies, which I'm not a fan of, and we've talked about ICE before on the channel. Um, yeah, did you ever get to go down to Tijuana?
I didn't. The farthest I ever made it south was like National City, where you can see over the border into Tijuana. So it was very interesting because there's a stark difference between San Diego and how it's set up and arranged, and everything's kind of orderly. If you look across the border, a lot of the buildings are kind of dilapidated, haphazard. It's just like night and day, I would say, between the levels of like wealth and prosperity on either side of the border. And so, yeah, I mean, it's obvious why people try to come to the US to have more chance and opportunity. And when we were there, people would, um, you know, try to get around the border, take a boat all the way up to the beach in San Diego, hop out on the beach and just run basically, or, find ways around the border. Um, and again, I have a lot of empathy for the reasons why people are drawn to do that, but it does create problems within society when people immigrate illegally. But I think my standpoint is I think people who are advocating for stronger legal pathways of immigration, that makes the most sense because then they can actually be like a productive member of society and live in that dignified way. They can get a job, they can help support the economy, they can pay taxes. The more legal immigration in my book, the better. The system is set up in a way where it forces people to try to come here illegally instead, and then that's where I think most of the issues lie.
Yeah, but do I think ICE is going to solve those issues?
Oh
100%
no.
not.
No, and to your point, Tom Steyer, the billionaire, was saying that ICE is a criminal organization, um, and it's terrorizing people. We should prosecute them for racial profiling and protect immigrants and investigate any wrongdoing by ICE. I don't know, would you say that's kind of more or less where we fall on this show?
I would say that's probably more where I fall for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Whereas Hilton, like you said he was an immigrant. He's from the UK. He's pro-legal immigration, but very hardline against illegal immigration. And Bianca, who was the sheriff in, I want to say Riverside, he, like you said, had a hardline illegal immigrant approach because I'm sure he's seen a lot of the results of people who come here illegally and then have to kind of exist in a different underground society. Yeah, so then there's Chad Bianco, who is the Riverside sheriff, who's very kind of tough on crime, and that probably comes from his experience of being a sheriff and all the stuff that he's seen within probably communities of illegal immigrants who are kind of forced to live in a kind of almost like underground world where, who knows what they have to do in order to survive. So he probably understands the way that immigration can contribute to potentially crime or that kind of activity, and so he wants to have a hardline stance on no illegal immigration.
In terms of immigration policies, I think I definitely disagree with him on those like harsher lines.
Yeah, like we said on Washed Up, we're pretty clear about we want more legal pathways to citizenship. And we don't like ICE or the federal government sending in masked agents to round people up, ask for their passports, potentially racially profiling them, in violation of the 14th Amendment and or the Equal Rights Clause. And yeah, so that's pretty much where we stand. What did you think? They talked about the state sanctuary law, SB 54. What do you know about that and the discourse around it?
If I remember correctly, I think all of the Democrats were in favor of defending the California sanctuary policies. Am I right with that? I
Pretty
remember,
much.
yeah, like all of them were um pretty into that. I know some people who have like worked with different like California sanctuary policies. I'm not like super familiar on all of them, but sanctuary policies in general, I tend to lean a little more in favor of. I think that people immigrating here is already hard, and I think there should be some type of like bridge to gap that, and sanctuary policies seem like maybe not the only solution, but a helping one.
Yeah, so this law that they were talking about, I think it's from 2017, which it would basically, again, it's a California state law where they're required to release apprehended illegal immigrants, um, so that ICE has to then go back, or they can't just arrest them and detain them because they're illegal. ICE rather has to be the ones to go out and arrest them, instead of just getting them from the local state jail or wherever they're taken after arrest. And that's my understanding of the law, at least. And people are very upset about this in some cases because there's the federal immigration law and the federal enforcement of that law, which is basically what ICE is designed to be. And so to have a state law that is going to contradict that or make it hard for the federal to uh, enforce the federal law, then that is a problem. And, I'm generally not a big fan of federal encroachment or overreach, but I also am a fan of the 10th Amendment, which says that in issues where there is a discrepancy between state and federal law, um, it tends to defer to the state. But then there's also federalism, where it says that the federal government takes precedent in some situations. And so, yeah, it
Big
is a
fan of
tricky one.
federalism here.
It's a tricky one as to like which law takes precedent, and I'm sure that the courts have had to consider these things. Before we leave immigration real quick, there was one exchange between Porter and Bianco that was getting a lot of talk because they were talking about the ways that immigration as an issue gets weaponized by either one side or the other. And if they're talking about basically like migrants who are parents and mothers, and what do you do, and how those immigrants adapt to a terrible situation. And Bianco made a dig at Porter. Porter said back, I don't need a lecture about being a mother. And Bianco said, you might.
Crazy mother who lost her child.
Sir, I don't need any lectures from you about being a mother.
Of course, you might.
Okay. Okay, Colleen.
And there was basically just like an audible like kind of gasp in the audience because it was just very, I mean, I think that's stooping pretty darn low to be calling that into question on the debate stage.
Yeah, I also am not. I think we've talked about this on the show before too. I'm not a big fan of like when candidates or politicians like say things at each other's throats like that, and it seems like they only say things to get like a soundbite out of it or get like super emotionally caught up in each other's like you said, it seems like a pretty like low low-hanging fruit there. Because it really just distracts from what they're actually talking about and creating a general educated public, which are ideally what we have in a republic to be able to vote. So, not a big fan of when comments like that happen.
I mean, I'm sure also people were bringing up the fact that, Katie Porter was the only woman on that stage. For him to say something like that, specifically directed at her, felt like it was targeting her in a kind of uniquely aggressive way and pointing out like what do you call into question the parenting of the like men and the potential fathers on that stage. It just seems like perhaps it was a dig that I don't know whether he went into the debate planning to deliver or not, or it just happened in the moment, but either way, to me, it seemed like a pretty low blow.
Another California issue, I think this could be maybe the last one we talk about, maybe energy and the climate, big one in California.
Yeah, they're talking about there's I guess like one nuclear power plant in California that is up to close down, and so they're asking each candidate, would you extend the operating of this nuclear power plant? Most of them I think said yes, and even some of them said we'll build even more power plants.
Big nuclear energy fans over here. I always like to joke that the all the data centers um from AI and whatnot are going to trigger the revolution of nuclear energy, and that's the best part about it.
I mean, that's what they keep saying with all the data centers that are going to apparently be using so much more electricity. It's like, how do you find a way to support those without boosting the consumer cost of electricity? Nuclear does seem like one potential solution there. And I'm actually going to be going to an event on Wednesday with the Secretary of Energy who will be there. So maybe I will ask for our audience.
Ask, get a little sound clip for Washed Up.
And also the couple of secretaries that have now had to leave their positions too, it kind of changes the game a little bit. Like I feel like it's not to me, those positions aren't as sort of like sacred or untouchable as they once were because we've seen many of the cabinet secretaries have to leave or be forced out, again, including Bondi, Nome, the labor secretary. There's rumors right now that the FDA head, Marty McCary, is on his way out also. So, yeah, I don't know. Lots of people leaving the administration, lots of interim people right now, and it just doesn't necessarily seem as, I don't know, important as it once did.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's they're just people, like they like to say.
Let's not forget it. Same goes for these California governor candidates. They're just people. They all have their flaws, and we should bear that in mind if you're going to be voting in California. Um, Try to choose the least flawed candidate. Who do
That's
you think?
that's
Who do
my
you think you would vote for if you had to, Abby?
like now that I've talked about it, I feel like I referenced Steyer a lot in what I liked, so maybe that's where I would be voting.
Okay. I would think I would go with Villaraigosa, the former LA mayor, again, because I feel like he had seen stuff. I feel like he understood the practical challenges of things. He was a Democrat, but he's pretty moderate. He seemed to understand the fact that regulations are oftentimes a lot of the problem with the costs and the, construction issues that they have with the housing side. So I think I would support him personally, but I'm not voting in California, obviously.
You California voters, get out there and do your thing.
Anyone but Newsom, who cannot run again because he is term limited.
Hmm.
Although,
Although he might be running for something even bigger. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a chance to vote.
what
Um,
makes you think that?
I
Is
don't know.
it his memoir, maybe?
Yes.
His constant insinuation on social media?
I don't know. We'll see, but I'm pretty sure we're right.
Yep. And with that, I think we are done with episode 50.
I can't believe it. Okay, washed up.
Washed up out.